Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the cyber webinar series. So today we'll be talking about governing AI in trucking, a practical framework for secure deployment. We're just going to give everybody another minute to join. We still see people joining, so we'll start here in about a minute. Thank you. All right. Looks like we've got quorum, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, today's webinar from NMFTA is governing AI and trucking. And so with me today, I've got Ben and Erica. So guys, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Ben, do you want to get started?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. I'm glad to be here. Welcome, everyone. Ben Wilkins. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity for NMFTA. My background before here is actually in the transportation space. I've spent my whole career in the trucking industry, kind of worked my way around all the different angles from driver to dispatch to back office and moved into IT and cybersecurity. And that is the Reader's Digest version that brought me here a couple of years ago to help translate some of the industry standards, your ISO standards, NIST standards, things like that, into frameworks and actionable kind of tools that we can use in transportation rather than more generic frameworks for multiple industries. So I like to say that I'm the NMFTA translator. Eric, I'll
Thanks.
toss it over to you.
Sure. Erica Brigance, I'm the Vice President of Strategic Products and Analytics for ArcBest, a fully integrated transportation logistics company. We fulfill LTL services through our ABF Freight brand, truckload brokerage through our Molo brand, and expedite through our Panther premium brand as well. So just a couple of things that ArcBest has to bring. I have been with ArcBest for just a little over 22 years, both in line of business and IT, and have responsibility for our AI strategy.
Thanks, Erica. And I'm Joe Orr, the COO and Chief Technical Officer at NMFTA. I've been with NMFTA for 3 years. Spent the last 30 years almost of my career in IT security within the transportation industry. So, with that being said, I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. And so, one of the things we're going to talk about is NMFTA is getting ready to release an AI guidebook. So, Ben, I'm gonna start with you. I know when we started in this discussion of, hey, we want to do an AI guidebook. It was really based on a lot of different things, and some of the feedback at first was, is it just a bunch of buzzwords? But why did NMFTA decide, hey, this is an important thing, this AI guidebook?
Well, I think, Joe, it's a couple of points that really led to this. And the first one is obviously AI adoption is, it's a blinding speed right now. Everybody is adopting tools that are AI enabled. We're seeing AI pretty much bolted on to all of the systems that we've been using. And a lot of the frameworks and a lot of the guidance and governance that's out there specifically for AI and AI enabled tools is really geared more towards organizations that are building AI tools or that are responsible for the models themselves and kind of the frameworks to put around those, the controls to put around those. And we really saw that there's a need for, in transportation specifically, for some guidance and some controls that we can put in place around these AI enabled tools that we don't necessarily control the underlying models. We don't necessarily control or train these AI tools themselves, but we're consumers of them. And we need to understand how to wrap security around those tools. And at the same time, not require everyone to become an expert in AI security to do so. And so that really was our goal, and that was the impetus behind taking these a couple of different standards and really looking at how to pull them apart and find the pieces that apply specifically in transportation from a practitioner standpoint and put those into a single cohesive framework that we can give to the trucking industry.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Erica, why do you think, or does trucking need its own AI governance framework, or should it simply adopt generic AI governance standards based on what Ben said and based on your experience?
So I think like Ben talked about, there are some things very specific, whether you're building, whether you're deploying AI tools that you've purchased or partnered with someone, and there are specific guardrails that the trucking industry needs to think about. And AI is ever prevalent. So it's from the desktop applications that we use to, talk with our customers. It's the software that's running on our trucks and trailers. And so I really feel like something having specific for the trucking industry is very useful just to help guide people to think about all of the places that AI is going to integrate into our business and how we need to think about securing those things and ultimately, as we talk about ArcBest, using those tools responsibly because that's just as important.
Okay. And Ben, um, as we reviewed the guidebook, and you did a lot of the heavy lifting on the guidebook. I thought it was interesting. You started with governance before technology. Was that intentional? Why would we start with governance before technology?
Yeah, that was very much a deliberate choice, and one of the reasons for that is one of the core aspects of solid governance is leadership buy-in and leadership support. And any big initiative or large scale security program really needs to start with leadership support. It needs to have organizational buy-in, and it needs to be part of a culture that gets built around this idea of securing AI and of responsibly and safely integrating AI into our operations. So that's definitely, things like inventorying what you have and kind of building your policies are really a key part of laying the groundwork on which you can layer technical controls. But without that governance piece at the beginning, you really don't have a strong organizational foundation to put technical controls in place that are going to stay.
Okay. Erica, what do you feel are the biggest misconceptions that fleets have today about AI risk or AI in general?
Well, I think just understanding what all it can do and what it really is. AI is a term that gets thrown around a lot these days. It's a term that can be very misleading at times. One might argue that, we've had automation techniques for decades. Is that AI? Is that not AI? I really like in the guidebook that you go through kind of those three layers of AI, and that's really the way we think about it. Both generative AI, predictive AI, prescriptive AI. We tend to lean into optimization whenever we talk about prescriptive AI. Um, but really just thinking about what it is, what can it do, and just to follow up with something Ben said, when you really think about starting with that governance, asking yourself and your senior leadership team, what are you comfortable with AI doing in your business? And you really got to ask those questions first because that will guide the decisions that you make, the infrastructure that you put, how you secure it, where you'll roll it out, how you'll train employees. That is really the foundation that everything is built upon. It's just thinking about where we're comfortable deploying it, where we're not, where we're going to keep a line of sight. So we may not be comfortable now, but we may be comfortable in the future as this technology progresses. So having those really frank discussions and documenting that and keeping that front of mind, otherwise you'll get overwhelmed with all of the possibilities.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, one of the challenges that when as we work with the different companies, it feels like AI's the go-to. It's like, oh, AI is going to solve all our problems. And so I know one of the first questions anytime we look at AI is, okay, what problem are we trying to solve? Um, and that I think that goes to what you were saying, because when an organization deploys AI tools without clear direction, that tends to be a major problem. So, Erica, another one with you is what does happen when organizations deploy AI tools without ownership and oversight and direction? I mean, what does that look like versus the way that you guys are doing it at ArcBest?
Well, I mean, I might say it'll lead to a lot of extra costs without a lot of benefit to show for it if you're not careful. Um, I think for us, having that line of sight of what you're going to do with it and thinking about how it fits into the process. And I really like what you said, Joe. When when somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, how could we use AI to do this?" Well, let's talk about the problem we're trying to solve, and let's ensure that we need AI to do this because there may be another technology that we can bring to bear that is not AI that may have less risk associated with it. And if we're going to use AI, the one thing that I will say is be really thoughtful about the process with which you're trying to deploy AI in and how comfortable your employees are using AI tools or giving AI tools autonomy to do things on their behalf. If you don't think about those things up front, you will get in a state where the technology may be ready, but your people may not be ready, or the process is not optimized to take advantage of what you're looking for there. So, we talk about kind of those three legs there. There's the technology, there's the people, and the process, and all of those
Mhm.
have to line up to really think about how you're going to drive benefit through these technologies.
Okay, absolutely. So, Ben, when creating the framework, first of all, when does the framework get released?
It's actually going to go live today, so folks will be able to download the framework today from our website.
Okay. And who's it designed for? Is it small carriers, brokers, big fleets, enterprise fleets? What's the target audience for the framework?
So we really tried to design this to be flexible enough that a small business could take guidance from this and an enterprise could take guidance from this. Now, is a small business going to necessarily take every single control and every single piece of governance and do it completely? It may not fit. It may need to be scoped down to what they have the resources for and what they have the need for. Because to Erica's point earlier, if you start with your business case and you decide where you're comfortable deploying AI and you decide where you don't want to utilize AI, then you may find that not every single control is relevant in your situation if you've got a limited use case. So the goal is really to have it be flexible enough and complete enough for a larger organization while still not leaving the smaller organizations out.
Okay. And this question's for both of you. Eric, I'll start with you. You mentioned you've been in AI for quite a while. One of the biggest things that always comes up is data privacy. What are the biggest data privacy concerns you see emerging in transportation due to AI? And how did you address those?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a couple of ways to approach that. One is just thinking about your data privacy. So your data that you're using with these models, where is that being housed? How's it being used? What are the protections you have in place, either within your infrastructure or with the partners that you're choosing to ensure that that data does not get shared or used in some way that you're not comfortable. So you have to think about that. You need to think about what data you're comfortable sharing with any providers that you choose to partner with. We've had discussions with some of our partners before about, hey, I'm comfortable sharing this data with you. I'm not comfortable sharing this data with you. We'll need to think of another way to expose whatever you need for this to run. So you've got to think about how important, for us, our data is one of the most proprietary things that we have. It gives all the information about our business. I have to be very choosy about what I'm willing to share with a partner and what I'm not willing to share. And then the other is, a lot of these models are using past data to make future decisions. You have to think about what past data you're using to train any model and what
Mhm.
bias that brings in to that model. So if I train a model on our current freight profile, let's say, and our freight profile changes, all of a sudden that model may not be as relevant to our business any longer. And so just be really thoughtful. It's a very ongoing process about how you're thinking about how you weight that data whenever you're training a model, or whether you're training it yourself or with a partner. And then how your business changes. Is that model still applicable to your business, or does it need to be adjusted as your business changes?
Okay. Ben, what same question to you?
Yeah, so I think to follow on to something Erica said, when we think about where the data is going and how the data is being used, one of the specifics that we want to watch out for is our data going to be used to train another model? Is that data that we're using in our organization also feeding the provider's training data set? So that's a really important piece because there are data leakage concerns there, that information may be accessible outside of your organization in an unintended way. And to another point that you made, Erica, I think data quality, input data quality and training data quality is huge. They're two different animals. Your data that you train with is obviously crucial to get a model that's properly trained, properly kind of configured for your environment. But the data that you then work with when you're using this model is going to determine, it's an age-old thing, poor data quality in, poor data quality out. It's the same thing with AI. We need to be cognizant of the fact that it's not necessarily this magic box that we can put poor data quality into and get amazing data out of. So we do want to think about that. And I think one of the things that is high on my list is understanding what data does this tool have access to in your environment. Is it only the data that you intend it to have access to? I tell people that the AI tools are a lot like overeager interns with a little bit too much permissions in their profile because it will try to accomplish the task any way that it can. And that may be through using data in a way that you don't expect or a way you don't intend. So really focusing in on what are those controls around access for the tool itself. I think that's one thing I would call out.
So you both bring up really good points. And I think another point of that is not only the data that comes in and out, but how it can be shared between customers, like if we use the same vendor. So what are some steps that you can take, a company or a carrier could take to prevent the data commingling between customers? I know that that's something that we've had to focus on at NMFTA because you may have somebody putting in contracts, you may have people putting in sensitive data, like you said. So how do you prevent the data commingling between entity or between customers?
I'll jump on that one, and Erica, I'd love to hear your
Okay.
thoughts as well. I think the very first thing is you need to ask the vendor. You need to have that conversation immediately when you start doing your RFPs or talking to vendors that are potentials. You need to ensure that you get that answered from them in as part of your contract. I think that's really because all of this stuff is as a service, right? This is going to be some solution as a service to you. So understanding where is that data stored, how is that access control handled in the vendor's organization, who can access that data, is it isolated properly between customers? That needs to be the very first conversation you have with your vendors.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. I mean, any vendor that we're discussing partner with, we've got a pretty rigorous security review that we go through with them, and part of that is where is the data going to be stored? What other access is anyone going to have to that data? Is it a single tenant, multi-tenant type discussion about where that data is stored and what other customers' data may be stored with ours? So that is part of our review and evaluation. And again, the answer sometimes depends on the solution that we're driving, but always part of the question and understanding the risk that we're considering there.
Okay. So Erica, we've started to see, I mean, I don't think there is a day that goes by that I don't get an email from an AI vendor. I don't get a phone call from an AI vendor or a LinkedIn request from an AI vendor. So I would say there's a rapid adoption of AI. Um, how do you think that's changed transportation, or have we not yet seen that change?
I think we're just getting started with that change, in all honesty. Like you, I'm getting those same email marketing, the phone calls are coming in. They're reaching out to various people within our organization with opportunities. I'll say the one thing is always start with the business process that you're trying to optimize, to make better. What's that business case? Vendors can do a lot of really impressive demos, but sometimes whenever we get into, the meat and potatoes of it, it's like this is a really cool idea, but it's not going to drive meaningful efficiency or growth within our business. So while it's a neat option, it's probably not something that we need to consider at this point. And if you stay really focused on that, it will help weed out all of those things that are coming at you. And for us, a lot of times it's about setting really clear um, goals at the beginning of the year. Where do we want to deploy this? What are some of the processes that we want to think about deploying AI in? What are some of the technologies we want to evaluate? And if you've got clear line of sight to that, as all of these vendors are coming in, you can measure that against what your goals are and quickly say, whether that's directly to a vendor or in my case, sometimes to leaders within our organization, hey, this is a interesting use case. I can see the value of what they're driving there, but it's not one of our priorities right now. So we'll follow back up at some point because it can get very overwhelming with all these demos, and there's a lot of money being spent right now in this space. And so all of these vendors are very hungry for customers, and they're competing against each other very heavily right now.
Okay. And Ben, let me change the question a little bit for you. The adoption of AI, how's it changed the cybersecurity conversation in transportation?
Well, I think, and this is probably true for a lot of industries, I think it's making the cybersecurity conversation more complicated because this is a new animal that we don't necessarily have existing kind of processes to control it and to secure it properly. And it's evolving extraordinarily fast. And so it's a very dynamic impact on cybersecurity in every industry, but transportation being one of them. It's a new technology. Anytime you add in additional technology or additional integrations, places for your data to be or to flow, you're adding potential attack surface. You're adding new risk areas to your organization, and so it's one of these things that we are learning to secure as this technology evolves. I think that the one of the biggest issues that I see is from a cybersecurity perspective. I guess there's really two, but it's the speed of adoption internally is often a security challenge. If we're rushing to deploy additional new tools, and we're not necessarily going into it with a security mindset from the beginning of the project, that can open up unexpected issues later on. I guess that would actually be my number one concern, and the fluidity of the tool itself, right? Because again, there's unexpected behaviors, unexpected outcomes that we need to plan for. We need to be prepared for.
So follow up on that, and I'd be interested, Eric, in your thoughts also. But I'll start with Ben. So, everybody gets excited with AI. So, with what you just said, how does an organization balance that innovation, but yet protect themselves, with sense of operational customer information? How do you balance that? What are some of the recommendations in the guidebook? And then, Erica, what are some of the recommendations that you have as far as balancing innovation with protection?
Well, I think it really starts with understanding, number one, Erica said this a couple of times earlier as well. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And what is the outcome you're hoping to have? What does a successful outcome look like? And once you establish those two endpoints and you've got your goal in mind, then you can start to look at what data is this going to access? Where is that data going to go? How is it going to be processed? Who can access this AI tool? And are they properly trained? Do they understand the capabilities and the limitations of the tool? And then we need to put controls around, not just what kind of data can go in, but what kind of outputs are we going to accept from this tool? Where are we going to put the human in the loop to ensure that decisions aren't just being handed off to a new shiny object that may or may not be producing the correct outcome 100% of the time. So I think it's a multi-step process of putting the business case first and then stepping through that whole process towards the end state and putting layered security along the way.
Okay, Erica, what about you?
Well, I'll just echo that. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is AI is a probabilistic tool, not a deterministic. And as someone who has been in IT for a long time, I have dealt with deterministic systems. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do
Mhm.
this, else do this. Very easily, you can say, you can go back through and you can figure out exactly how something fell through that and why an action was taken. In AI, everything is based off of probabilities. The probability that an outcome is going to happen, the probability that this is the best decision I can make at this time, the probability of the next word as these generative tools are creating content. And so, with that, you have to think completely differently about that. And you have to know what is an acceptable level of just completely honesty, failure, because deterministic systems, I can tell you what will happen in every case. A probabilistic system, I can tell you that this will happen 85% of the time. Is that okay? And is that other 15% okay whenever that's not the outcome that we thought was going to happen? And so you've got to have guardrails around that, to Ben's point about what's coming out. What are you comfortable with in that? And if you can't get that model to a level where you're comfortable with that, and that is the definition of innovation, is determining what you're comfortable with, moving fast with some of these things, and accepting that occasionally it may go wrong, but the benefits of when it goes right outweigh that. But you got to have those guardrails going into it, and you got to make sure everyone understands the outcome there. And to the point, if 85% is not an acceptable outcome, then I need a person to verify that. Well, that may change your business case. If I've still got to have somebody monitoring the systems, that may not have been what you were expecting an outcome. So just thinking through all of that is very important as you're deploying these systems, as you're thinking about the appropriate use case within your business.
So you both mentioned it. A lot of people see AI as, it's going to really replace a lot of the people work. But you both indicated that there's some human review that's still essential as even as AI systems become more capable. Um, do you agree I mean, it sounds like you agree with it, but why else is human review still essential? I mean, it seems like AI is evolving. So, and do you ever see that changing where the human review is essential?
I
Eric,
would
I'll start
say,
with you.
Yeah.
oh, okay,
Or,
go ahead.
sorry, Ben,
No,
go
no, go
ahead.
ahead. Go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, I mean, just to be clear, we have some systems that are fully automated using AI. It is appropriate in some cases. I just think you have to acknowledge the risk, how quickly a decision needs to be made, the risk of making a wrong decision. What are the outcomes happen if I make a wrong decision? And that helps guide your decision about when you have a person in the loop and when you don't. Um, but, so many of these AI tools are really assistance for our people. They are helping them find better information, consolidate lots of information to make decisions more quickly. So that is still central to our AI strategy, is how do we get these tools in our people's hands? We've got a lot of people that have done a job in our company for decades. They have a lot of knowledge about how to route freight, the decisions they make when they're pricing freight. how do we get someone new in our company up to speed quicker? And how do we get them a tool that makes it easier to process all of that information? And so, I mean, our people are still going to be central to how we operate our business. We are a relationship business. We're going to continue to rely on that. What I want are better tools for our people to have more meaningful conversations and better tools for our customers to get information that they're searching for easier in a better format than having to sift through and make decisions and assumptions based off of what they're getting.
Okay. Ben, sorry.
No, that's fine. I think I jumped in on that one, but I would agree. I think that impact is incredibly important. You know, understanding what is the impact of an incorrect decision is kind of priority one. You also have to consider that accuracy, like Erica mentioned in the last her last answer, that this is probabilistic. If you're getting a 99% accuracy across the board, then that's probably something that you can let that process automate. You know, or you can let AI automate that process and kind of spot check and audit on the back end. But if you're getting an 85 or an 80%, or there's a high impact or a safety issue with an incorrect outcome, then you need to have a human in the loop on that until that's 100% accurate, which, you know, is a bit of a lofty goal at this stage in AI.
Okay. There, I just also, we're about halfway through. There is a Q&A button at the bottom. If you do have a question, please feel free to put that question in the chat button that says Q&A. And I would be happy to ask some of those questions. Right now, we're just kind of going through some questions that are on top of mind. But if you do have questions, please feel free to ask. So, Ben, as I we reviewed this and looked through it, there's a lot of it's written at a level that really makes sense. But one of the things you talk about is like prompt injection, manipulation attacks. How you said you introduce yourself as a translator. So translate that into a way transportation leaders can understand and really get the risk.
Yeah, so prompt injection really is simply crafting an input into the tool that tricks it into doing something it's not supposed to do, right? That gets an outcome that is either unsafe, undesirable, you know, maybe it's data that's exposed, maybe it's intentionally tricking the tool into giving an incorrect answer, you know, some sort of a malicious input of any kind. So that would be a prompt injection. You know, there's lots of different exploitations that can be kind of targeted against these tools, but that's one of the most familiar and the kind of most accessible from a consumer endpoint is malformed or malicious inputs going into these tools intentionally.
What kind of damage can that do? And can you give me a specific example, real world?
Yeah, so if you think about maybe a customer assistance chatbot on a website,
Hmm.
that's going to be likely trained on internal data so that it can be helpful and answer questions to a customer. But it's going to have guardrails around it to not reveal data that a customer shouldn't have access to. Maybe information about another customer's freight or information, internal policies or processes that may be part of the training data, but aren't supposed to be released to an external person on the website. And so what an injection attack would look like in that scenario would be to craft an input to get some of this proprietary data out of that chatbot, to get it to kind of step outside that guardrail and say, oh, let me help you with that. And here's the data you're asking for, even though it's not supposed to do that in that situation.
Okay. And then another one, Ben, the framework talks a lot about AI inputs and outputs. Why do you believe the inputs and outputs are important? And then Erica, same question to you. So Ben, I'll start with you.
Well, the input is again, like we just talked, you know, there's a potential for misuse at the input point. So that's where the interaction with the AI tool begins, is with some sort of an input, whether that's data, whether it's a sensor that triggers some action, or it's a human typing into a chat box. That's your input. And that the quality of that and the safety of that input, I guess I would say, is what kicks off this whole process and is critical at the beginning. The data output is whatever the AI tool produces at the end, whether that's an alert that goes out. If you think about, maybe there's a sensor that's kind of signifying there may be some maintenance that's going to be needed in a predictive maintenance tool, or a warning to a cybersecurity analyst that says, hey, there's a problem in your network. You need to look at this. So that's your output. And we need to understand, are these inputs being properly filtered to make sure that malicious inputs can't get in? Is the quality of the data being ensured so that the right kind of input is being put in to get a useful answer? And then on the output side, we need to understand, are we getting the outputs, number one, that we expected? And are we getting the outputs in a way that is consistent? And that's where the explainability and transparency that Erica was talking about earlier comes in, because if we're putting in good data and we're getting really unexpected results, but we have no idea why, because there isn't any transparency or any explainability through the process of how that model reached that output, then we're going to have a really hard time fixing or tuning that. So we need to understand how the decision was made enough to shape the inputs to get the right outputs.
Okay. Erica, what about you?
Well, one thing that I was saying, I completely agree with everything Ben said. The other thing is don't underestimate just making sure your employees understand their responsibilities when they're using these tools. So we've done a lot of education and training on their responsibility. And so, early on, I used to use the phrase that I want people to be curious enough to play with these tools, but skeptical enough to question what they're getting out of these tools. Because I don't want, again, going back to it being probabilistic, not deterministic. And many of these tools that employees have access to, they want to help. They are built in a way that they are always going to give you an answer. Whether it's the most accurate, useful answer is another question. And so one of the things is making sure your employees know their responsibility to critically judge what they're getting. And again, like even we had the discussion, if you ask it to draft an email for you and you hit send and you didn't read it, it's not the AI's fault. It's your fault because you allowed it to create something on your behalf and you sent it without checking it. So, those are the types of things, even in security, we talk about don't underestimate just the training of the employees to know what their responsibilities are. It's the same way with our AI tools.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll add to that. One of the things that happens is we have tools that there are tools out there that access data. And of course, there's been certain data leaked out in AI. And I stumbled upon an application that was out there that was actually using NMFTA data. And I called the vendor and I said, "Hey, your tool violates our copyright." And his response was, "No, I got it from AI. It's okay." And I'm like, "No, you're still responsible for making sure it was giving you information. It did not give you the right to put that information out there in a free tool." I said, "That's proprietary." And I was amazed because his response was, "Well, no, I got it from AI. That means it's okay. Whatever AI produces, I'm allowed to reproduce." And it's like, no, AI was, no, that's not the way AI works. So I think your point's extremely valid.
We've got a
So,
control in the guidebook, Joe, speaking specifically about that, is
yeah,
ensuring that your tools aren't exposing or using copyrighted information for that
yeah,
very reason. Because we see that all the time with these generative tools. They're trained on information that may be copyright protected.
yeah. I was playing around with it because I wanted to see if I could get AI to do it, and it did. And it gave me a little message saying, "Hey, you know, some of this data may be proprietary, but it still did it." And again, there's also ways to trick the tool. I know, even my son is like, oh, AI wouldn't give me this, but I asked it in this way and it generated it. It's like, oh, this will be used for test purposes. So, there's definitely a way to manipulate, but I think your point that the user is responsible, and the email example is perfect. So, Ben, the guidebook talks a lot about governance control. What of all the which governance control do companies overlook when adopting AI? What's the one that you say, you know what? This is in the guidebook. We talk about it, and this is the one that no one seems to pay attention to.
I think planning for failure, planning for these tools to fail and knowing what to do when they do. Having a response plan in place, and having definitions of what is a failure. At what point is it an anomaly or is it a failure of the tool? I think that's a really important piece of the planning and the preparation phase, that needs to be constantly kept up to speed with the organization as the organization evolves.
Erica, same question to you. What's the one governance you feel is overlooked?
Well, I mean, I think I would echo what Ben said, and I think I would add to that, like, start small. Start small, try things, be willing to say that's not the right thing to pursue, or hey, we didn't take this into account. A lot of times, we'll get this idea of a very broad use case, and we want to get that up and running very quickly, but we've got to kind of almost take that in small bites so that we can, as Ben says, plan to fail on that, because things may go wrong and that allows us to pivot. If we try to, you know, take all of that at one time, the options for failure get very big. So when we plan to fail, we want to fail small along the way.
Okay.
That's a great point.
Yep. And Ben, either one of you, here's a question we got from the folks on the webinar. How can you control shadow AI? It's built into browsers and for free.
That's a good one. That's the $1 million question of this era. There are technical things that can be done, blocking kind of the access to the blocks, the IP blocks, and things that are known to be associated with the different AI tools, the generative tools. But a lot of that does come down to policy and training as well. And I think it's important to call out that telling employees no, you can't use generative AI in your work, in your workflow, isn't going to keep them from using it. I mean, these tools are here, these tools are being used. So the better approach is to find and properly configure a tool that works in your organization and is tuned to the needs of your employees so that you can give them a safe alternative. It's similar to the old shadow IT problem that we've had for decades, that if you're encountering shadow IT, it typically is a symptom of a need not being met in the organization that employees are trying to find a workaround for. And so really understanding that root cause, like what is the tool that the employees don't have that they need, and then properly configuring and controlling that tool as an alternative, I think is a strong counter to the risk of shadow IT.
Okay. Erica, anything you want to add?
No, I would just echo it. I mean, we talk about we have to safely and securely enable our employees to use this tool. So we have an approved tool that we feel like has the appropriate data protections and provides the appropriate outputs for our employee. We train, we communicate, we set policies about what you can and can't use and what your responsibilities are. We do block certain sites on the corporate network, but let's be honest, I can only control what they're doing on the corporate network. It gets really hard to
Yeah.
think about what they're doing on their personal machines. So I mean, you just got to educate people and let them know why it's so important that they have to be diligent for all of this, and having those policies in place and communicating that with employees. And I completely agree. If you don't provide them a tool, it's too easy for them to find a tool that you are not comfortable with. So you got to think about what you're comfortable and make sure you tell them why you're not comfortable with them using other tools.
Okay. Another question we got is how can organizations securely enable remote and unmanaged users to access AI models while maintaining governance, compliance, and cybersecurity controls?
Well, I think at its simplest, it's very similar to the way we control and protect access to the other data and the other tools in our organization. I think we need to understand the level of access that that employee needs and scope their access to AI-enabled tools appropriately. And that ties back to understanding what then that tool can access. As far as allowing them to access these tools remotely, again, having appropriate controls around them internally and having appropriate security controls around your remote employees as a baseline is going to provide you security for a remote employee who's accessing these AI tools. But a big piece of it really comes down to what is the data that they have access to through this tool, and is that properly controlled?
Okay. So let's look at the future. What do you think how do you think AI governance will change, or what do you think it will look like in trucking in 3 to 5 years from now?
Should we start with 3 to 5 months from now?
I was going
Yeah,
to
I
say,
know,
we
I
don't make
know,
3 to 5 year
I
AI
know.
plans
It
right
changes
now.
daily. So let's do 1 year within the next year.
I
Go ahead,
mean, for
Erica.
us, I think for us, we're monitoring adoption of these tools. There's a couple of things that we're doing. We're proactively trying to set a culture of AI readiness throughout our organization because we know it's going to be a tool. I use the example of we used to run our business without Outlook and Excel and Word, and now we cannot imagine running our business without those tools. It will be the same way, and it's happening very, very quickly. So making sure our employees are prepared for that, that they understand their responsibilities, they know how to use these tools, that they're thinking about how it's going to change their work. Another example that I use is we used to do math without a calculator. I can't imagine doing a lot of, heavy math without a calculator these days. So math didn't go away as a part of this. We still have mathematicians. The way that we solve these challenges, the types of challenges that we can solve have only gotten bigger and more complex with these tools. And I really think it's going to be the same way in our industry. And I think, just transparently, we don't know all the ways that it's going to change. Going back to your comment about 3 to 5 years, I do not know all the ways that it will change and all the ways that we'll deploy AI. I think it's still, for as long a legacy as AI has, it's still a fairly new in the hype cycle of what it's going to do, and we're all trying to figure out the right places to deploy it, um, personally, professionally, commercially, and those will change over time. And I think you just got to be open to the possibilities as they come available.
So Erica, what AI capability that's I let's consider emerging AI capability. What's the one that for you creates the most excitement?
I think a lot of things around vision AI are very exciting right now. Just
Okay.
the ability to process video at such a high speed and make meaningful determination that used to require people watching to do that. To me, those are some of the things that are very exciting. And again, it's not just the AI capabilities. Do we have the bandwidth? Do we have the right camera equipment that can process these images correctly? So there's a lot of things kind of converging that make that a very exciting time, I think.
Okay, and Ben, I'm going to flip the question on you because sometimes you're more doomy and gloomy. What is the emerging AI capability that causes the most concern for you?
Can I pick two?
Yes.
We'll do one doom and one gloom.
All
No,
right.
I think that the ability to fabricate digital identities. So deep fake voices, deep fake video. I think that's going to pose an increasing challenge for us in social engineering resistance. That's a tricky one, and that's one that's going to continue to catch a lot of people by surprise at the speed with which these kinds of tools have increased in capability. And the other factor that's really a challenge from a cybersecurity perspective is the speed and the scale of attacks that we're seeing that are AI enabled attacks. We've a lot of people have seen the information about the latest Anthropic model that was, the Mythos model or Mythos, however you choose to come down on that. The capabilities of these tools to find vulnerabilities and the speed with which these kinds of attacks can spread is really, it has dramatically outpaced human defenders. And so that's a real challenge to kind of surgically deploy defenses that are also AI enabled in order to prepare for this and to continue to guard our organizations.
Yeah, great point. I did a podcast this morning, and the person asked me, how do you fight AI? I was like, with AI. It can't be, man against AI. It's you got to fight AI with AI when it comes to a cyber perspective. So when someone reads the framework or even listens to what we've been talking about, um, if we would say, "Hey, I want you to remember one thing from this framework," what would it be, Ben?
I would like to have the takeaway be, know what you're trying to solve, be methodical, be diligent in your research ahead of time and your training throughout, and ensure that you know where you want to end up. Because we can, to Erica's point earlier about the vendors and their demos, they can look great, but they may not take your organization where you thought that tool was going to take it. It depends on a lot of different variables. And so having that clear picture in mind is very, very important as you start to adopt these tools and try to wrap security and policy and governance around these tools.
So, Erica, do you think organizations in transportation, let's say specifically, are we moving too fast with AI, or do you think we're moving at the right speed or not fast enough? How do you gauge the speed at which AI is coming within the transportation sector, within trucking?
We tend to be a very methodical industry about things, a very pragmatic industry. I think we're taking the same approaches here, and we're really thinking about where it fits, and where it might not fit. So I tend to think that as an industry, we tend to start with what are the outcomes we're trying to drive, either within our business for our customers, and we're taking that same approach, um so I think we're moving at the right speed. I think that speed sometimes is uncomfortably fast though, for companies, I mean, like ours that have been around for 103 years. It feels like every week there's a new option out there for us, and how are we going to take advantage? And I can barely get one done before the next one's lining up. um but I think we have to get comfortable with that kind of speed of change that is happening, because it is only going to persist, if not accelerate. There's just too much going on out there. There's too much money being spent in this space right now for it not to accelerate.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think pushes us outside our comfort zone quickly, which takes some getting to used to. I mean, at first, I know when we started talking about AI, everybody's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. What does this mean?" Or they watch just too many movies, and it's like, no, it's how you implement it. So I think you're spot on. Ben, what is one control in the framework that people should pick up the book and implement tomorrow?
I think maintaining an inventory of what tools are actually AI enabled in your organization and what impact those tools may have. What's the business impact of that tool, both what it does in its day to day and what are you going to do if it's not functioning right? Do you have a plan in place for that? But I think we often underestimate the number of tools that actually are AI enabled currently that are already in our tool stacks.
Okay. And Erica, with your job role and responsibility at ArcBest, what keeps you up at night when you think about AI in within your company, within transportation?
Um, I think the concern that a tool will be used in a way that we're not comfortable with it being used. And just thinking about, again, I've had responsibility for our data for several years now. I am very protective of how we use that data and how it's going to be used and who has access to it and how they can share that with either a tool or amongst our employee base. And so just thinking through that, that is one of the things that's kind of top of mind for us right now. And again, I tend to be the voice of reason in a room sometimes whenever we get in these vendor sessions and they're talking about all this data that we'll share and all the things that we can do with it. I'm like, I don't know that I'm comfortable sharing that with you. And you having that and knowing that you have that for potentially, my competition as well. And what are you going to do once you have all of that? So you've got to think about those types of things. Because once it leaves your network, outside of the security controls and the contracts that you have in place, I don't know that you know all the ways that it's being used. So be very thoughtful about that. And that probably keeps me up at times.
Okay, Bing, same question for you. What keeps you up at night with AI?
I think similar to Erica's point, I think that the implementation of AI enabled tools in an organization before they're fully understood, before the ramifications of, again, what could go wrong and have we planned for it? Do we have protections in place? Because it's very easy to get excited about a solution to a problem that's been challenging an organization for a long time. And if we see a tool that really looks like it's going to solve that problem, there's a temptation sometimes to overlook some of the potential gotchas in that tool that we want to believe that it's going to work. And so that's the kind of implementation that makes me very nervous is an implementation that may overlook some of the risks for the sake of speed.
Okay. So I think that it on time. First of all, wanted to thank you guys both for joining today, answering all the questions. These guys do not get these questions ahead of time. We like it being unscripted, so appreciate you guys jumping on and answering the questions. Ben, I want to give you the last slide.
Yeah, so I'd love to invite everybody to head over to our site. The framework is going to be live today. It's freely available. Anyone can download. We've got all of the controls, kind of the explanations that Erica went through a lot of the explanation at the beginning of kind of the different types of models, different types of tools. That's all in there. And then there's a very simple implementation checklist that you can use in your own organization as you work through these controls and kind of scope these controls out. So again, it's available. I'd invite everyone to head over and check it out.
And that's at nmfta.org, and that will drop soon. So again, guys, thanks for your time and thanks to everybody who joined. Have a great day. And one last thing is we are doing our cybersecurity conference. It's once a year. It's the only one that's in the trucking industry. And it's September 29th, October 1st in Long Beach. Registration is open. We're going to focus on cybersecurity, but also focus on cyber-enabled cargo theft. So we've got probably 50-50 agenda. And cybersecurity is going to focus, of course, I think is a topic of every single session. But we'll also talk about asset and non-asset. So again, thank you everybody for joining. We appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.